Good morning, everyone. So eventually we all get into SketchUp. It may be early, it may be late, but if you're in an engineering or creative world, architectural world, my firm belief is you'll be using this or something like it, at least as a support tool. So I'm going to go through here based on some work that people are trying to do within Civil 3D and other things. I'm going to go through a real quick introduction to the sandbox tools and how you can use them to kind of get some pre-engineering. Get some pre-engineering on some site work, and I'm going to do it based on the assumption that everyone can pull in terrain from Google Earth, and I'll cover that in a separate one. But when you bring in terrain from Google Earth, you have to look at the layers and realize that there's one layer that is a snapshot, another one that is a photo rendered tin, more or less. And so that is something that you can then deal with to do things called drapes and stamps, to more or less project information off of a 2D design plane and have it pick up the 3D information of, for the most part, of an existing tin or existing digital terrain model. So we're going to go through the tools. The thing that you have to realize, why these are buried, I don't know, but the way you get the tools up is you have to go into Preferences, Extensions, and make sure you have the sandbox tools there. And they come in better or not on campus depending. Okay, once you have tools there, you want to be aware that layering is going to be a big part of this. So I'm going to go ahead and make some other layers. Even now tin, I'm going to make a layer called drapes. And I'm not sure what's going to happen when I make this original one, but I'm going to go ahead and make my current layer tin when I go and do this. And so the toolbar looks like this. View toolbars. Your toolbar looks like it's the sandbox toolbar, and sometimes I don't even see where you bring it in. There it is, sandbox. So you lose it, camera, view toolbars, it's the sandbox. So if you lose that toolbar, there's other places to find this stuff. All right, first and foremost, very often the best way to go about making a more or less a sandbox or a tin is to have a bunch of lines here that are contours. Now I'm going to skip that on the assumption that you all know how to draw lines and then put them at an elevation. We'll talk about that, how you do that in AutoCAD, but you're going to get information in that actually is 3D. I'm going to show you this, how to start from scratch basically, and use something called the smooth tool to kind of make your own kind of play around with it as we get some just of the concept stuff here. So this is basically bringing in a grid, and you want to tell it the grid spacing, whatever you want it to be. I'm going to make my site 400 by 400 as we'll do this as a building and not, I don't know, maybe like a ski resort or something. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go a length along that line here. I'm just going to make it 400 feet. And I'm going to make this other one 400 feet. And we'll see how small that was. But it actually made a grid in there. And you can see it made my grid in the wrong direction because blue is up. So I'm going to go back here. I was so out of scale. I'm going to go right here, right click erase. I'll try it again. A grid here, 10-foot spacing. I'm going to go 400 feet, and I'm going to go in this direction 400 feet. All right, so that makes a grid. And what a grid does is it immediately is a block. So I click on that. And if I'm going to go inside, I'm going to double click and I'm going to go right inside that. I'm sorry, it's a group, so it's a group. Now what I'm going to check right now is I'm going to look at one of these entities and see what layer it was created on. And I didn't want to erase that. Edit, undo, erase. Click on one of the entities in there and see what layer it was created on. It was created on tin, so that's great. So thinking about that prior is a good idea. All right, now I'm going to show you the smooth tool. So this would be the information that's gridded out that you would generally get something from like Google Earth. So the smooth tool looks like this. You've got the tools in the sandbox, which is to create tin from contours from scratch. That's the smooth tool. That's the stamp tool. That's the drape tool. And this is detail or flip edges. So what you need to do to smooth is this. You double click inside. You take your smooth tool and you give it a radius. And you can see that radius coming in there. So I'm going to start here with a 100-foot radius. I click on it, and then I'm just kind of pushing this stuff out to get some topography. I can change my radius maybe to 50 feet. Hitting a 50-foot here changes my radius. If I go over the top of something, you see how it's going to change it. I'm going up or down a certain direction if it lets me. Try this again, kind of going up. Try it again, pulling it up, pulling it down, pulling it up, pulling it down. And basically what are you doing? You're doing just like you would in Survey. You're making a grid pattern and changing grades. So you can actually do it, well, put a little cauldron in there. All right, so that's the basics of Konoho and doing it. And from that, of course, later on, you could also always go through here if you wanted and make a set of contours. I'll show you how you could kind of do that. I'm going to go ahead and go across here, take that set of line there. Basically now that is I took that face as I moved it up, and I've showed at least one student how this would work with water. I'm kind of bringing this up. You see how you can take something like that, take that there. Now what you can do is you can kind of click on this and click typically intersect with model, and then what you'd see is if you got rid of this, I'm going to erase, you'd see those lines in there. So there's all kinds of things you can do with that. I'm going to go edit, undo, intersect, and edit, undo, move, and then edit, undo, rectangle. What you see is that 10 more or less comes in as a group, and that's a really important thing for you to master, is to get things in groups and keep them in groups, and go in and out of groups, go in and out of components. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draft this, again, that face there, and I'm going to move it up above. And this is going to be what we're going to use for our horizontal design, for horizontal alignments, or for footprints on buildings. So I'm going to do something pretty quick here, just so you can see the tools and point you out to the SketchUp show. I'm not trying to steal their fire. I'm trying to push you out to the world that, yes, you're going to have to learn from video. Hate to break it to you. All right, here we go. I'm just going to draft a line right across this face, and I don't even know where that line's going. I'm going to think of it as kind of a path. I'm going to take that, and then in addition to that, I'm going to go ahead and draft a box here, out here, that I'm going to use for the drape tool. One is I'm going to use for the drape tool, one for the stamp tool. This is where your layering becomes really key right now, because if you think right now, I've just been putting everything on the same layer. Not a good idea. I've been putting it on tin. So I'm going to go ahead right now and put that stuff on the layer drapes layer. So the drapes layer, and I want the drapes layer to be current when I do my draping or when I do my stamping, because it's going to stamp them down into that tin. So I'm going to go right click, entity info, and put them all on the drapes layer. So everything there on the top is on the drapes layer, and my layer right now is also the drapes layer. You don't have to use the word drapes, just so you know. So let's look at how this works. Well, in many ways, I'm going to go, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to go ahead right now and erase out the face that I was drafting on. And I've got now something here, 1, 2, 3 things that I might want to push down onto that tin, more or less. So I'm going to grab them, 1, hold my shift key, 2, hold my third shift key, 3. And you might have wanted to make those a curve or something beforehand. What do you do to drape? Typically you go to here, you selected your objects, and then you select the mesh on which to drape, and you notice right there that if I click inside of there, that entity, those entities right there, right click, entity info, are on the drapes layer, which means if I come back later and say layers, I do not want the tin layer on, and I've got an active component, so I'm going to have to get out of here. If I do not want the tin layer on, layer, layers, now you see, more or less, I have pulled out my presumption, and you'd have to see because a couple things are double nested in. If I go back, I actually have pulled out that information within there. So because actually the tin is also on the tin layer, you have a bit of an issue. So really got to worry about the layering here. If I go inside here, I want to point out that that particular thing is on the drapes layer, but the whole block or the group is on the tin layer, so you have to be very careful about how independent you make these things. Alright, so that's the drape. The last one is then the the stamp. Stamp works similar, but it also has a potential for an offset. So I'm going to do this stamp with a 30-foot offset. Click on that, go down to here. It's going to more or less push that stamp and let me kind of do this in and out. Now it doesn't make that perfect civil kind of adjustable, but it pretty much does a building pad in a heartbeat. And that's about what I would call it, a heartbeat. It's not perfect. It's got some issue. If you notice here, it's keeping that offset, so it's changing your slopes, but it's more or less giving you this ability very quickly to sit on a perch here, look out on your world, saying your height is perhaps 20 feet tall, and being glad you didn't spend a lot of money for $5,000 software if in fact you didn't need it in the short term. Thanks for listening.